What were the non-negotiable values you had while building Nutanix?
Technically, one of the big non-negotiables was we will never go down when we're upgrading software, ever. And that became a multi-billion dollar feature for us. Almost all our competitors, when they would actually refresh software, they'd have to go down. One thing led to another, and we built a good business. We took it public in 2016.
What's the magical outcome you hold for DevRev?
Through 7 lines of code, you can expose the power of search for your internal documents, your customer data, your product data, your people data, your work data, your user data. All of it can actually come through a conversational interface.
You've deployed about 600 to 700 millions of dollars in India. How has your journey been in terms of India? How it all started?
For the first time when I came was 2013, we set up an office in Bangalore. And we really looked at India as first among equals. Like you could actually give the toughest problems to be solved. And that's what people appreciate, that you don't look at them as lesser people.
If you were to pick one thing, an edge that Indian tech ecosystem has over, let's say, Silicon Valley or rest of the world,
I think it's junoon, or also tied to hunger. There's no sense of entitlement. 40 million developers to 250 million people who can instruct the machine to do bigger, better things.
We had Dheeraj Pandey on the podcast. Dheeraj is a prominent Indian-born American tech entrepreneur and philanthropist. He founded Nutanix and took it public in 2018. Nutanix is currently valued at $17 billion. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of DevRev. DevRev is currently valued at 1.15 billion. In our conversation, we covered his upbringing in India, the motivations behind his move to the US, his journey into the tech world, insights on both Nutanix and DevRev, the companies he founded, his contribution to the Indian tech ecosystem, his excitement about the future of Indian tech, his philanthropic efforts to drive social impact, and much more. Now I bring you Dheeraj. Dheeraj, so excited to have you on the podcast. As we were discussing earlier, you've been the inspiration for this series, which is celebrating Indian diasporas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shiva, and it's going to be a pleasure. Let's do this together.
Dheeraj, we are really a byproduct of our environment. What really shaped you the most while growing up?
A lot of it was my home state of Bihar, which is where I grew up, and the people around me. There was so much help coming from my relatives because, my father used to work for the state government, and after 1989, things got really messy in Bihar in many ways. As you know, it was one of the most populous states, and also before the 70s, it was doing quite well. But then the criminal movement in politics happened, and then obviously one thing led to the other. Patna, which is where I used to live, was one of those good tier 2 cities like Lucknow and Hyderabad and Pune and places like that. But then in the 90s, obviously a big churn was happening. And in this quote unquote manthan, as we call it, a lot of things actually went topsy-turvy. And I think my father was affected in this because he would not get his salary for like 9 months at a time. So we got a lot of help socially from other people. And, I just have it etched in my memory and as to what it means to really make progress with help from others. And that has led me to think about giving back and, the emphasis on empathy and, where people are really coming from and what does it mean to actually get into their shoes. And I think also the sacrifices that my parents made, my mom made in particular, about continuing to send me to an expensive school while there was nothing at home for both me and my brother. And also 3 of my cousins who actually grew together with me. I felt like there was a sense of camaraderie that really built within us. So what parents have to do to sacrifice their lives to really get their children through, and tough stuff is a part of my psyche as well. And last but not the least, I think just fun-loving stuff. I was part of a very large joint family, both paternal and maternal, and we used to congregate a lot for various family occasions. And I was a very light-hearted guy and developed a sense of humor and wit, and that has stayed with me up until now.
Got it. And Dheeraj, you went to IIT Kanpur, and later you decided to move to the US for your grad school. What really made you move to the US? Just walk us through the journey and the.
Yeah, the trade-offs. Yeah. I was the first one to have gotten a job in our batch at Unilever, India. The first job that they gave out, had come to me. And of course, there's two other people who got it. Unilever used to be a pretty big management trainee role back in the day, and they would give it to a few people. And then after that kind of June, July sort of placement, I had applied to US universities because I wanted to keep the options open. I'd done fairly well in my academics at IIT. Those were difficult 3+ years before the fourth, senior year. But I had really insisted on saying, look, I need to do well in this environment. I can't just give up and say, look, who cares about grades or things like that. So I had the optionality. I'm like, let me just apply to youth universities and we'll see what comes out. And then by January, also had another offer to come and join Deloitte in Chicago. Again, this is the first year they had come to India to really hire directly in 1997, January, to come and hire from India. And I was one of the first. Actually, I was the first one that they had given an offer to in January. And then there was a bunch of other ITNs who they had called who got offers as well. And then by February, March, I started to get these university offers. I had offers from UT Austin, Texas Austin, Urbana-Champaign, Columbia, Northwestern, USC, places like that. And I figured, I have to make a call. And I basically called one of my seniors, who was 2 years my senior. His name is Gokul Rajaram. He's a pretty well-known person here in the Valley. Also happens to be one of our investors here. And he had the same kind of fork in the road between UT Austin and Urbana-Champaign. I had a little bit more confusion with Deloitte and Unilever, but it's like, just, close your eyes and come to UT Austin. It's like, happy cows have never seen any snow. I mean, we had never seen snow. Urbana-Champaign is a lot of snow and very difficult winters. And plus, I had a fellowship from Texas Austin, the computer science department, and I only had a research assistantship from Urbana-Champaign. So it made things a little bit easier. And Austin was a fun place. When I landed, there was obviously, it just eased me into settling down. It was a college town, but way bigger and more sort of action-packed than Urbana-Champaign would have been. So, one thing led to another. I chose UT Austin, and the rest is history.
Got it. Gokul, I've had the pleasure of knowing him over the years. He's a very active investor in India, and seems like he's a great guy. And Dheeraj, post grad school, you landed at bunch of iconic companies at the time, Oracle, Aster, and bunch others. How did you land into the world of tech? Was it the plan from the beginning, or how did it happen?
93, when I was still a sophomore. Actually, no, 93. I was a freshman. 94, I was a sophomore, and my cousin had just come down from the US. He had come to the US. He was a maternal cousin. He had come to the US in 1986, and he had spent a bunch of time working for a very famous company back in the day, Eastman Kodak, and then he had done his MBA from Stanford. So he was coming to India for the first time in 8 years, and we talked a lot about what's happening in the US. And one of the big things he talked about was the internet, and obviously 94 was still early for internet in India, but he talked a lot about HTTP and the browser and the Netscape. and what was going on with at Urbana-Champaign, which is the university that I eventually got an offer from. But then he talked a lot about how the World Wide Web is coming together. And it was fascinating. Now, up until that time, I was still not like, I was doing well in academics, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to really go pursue computer science or should I actually get into something else like economics, because India was going through a lot back in the day with Manmohan Singh, and he was a technocrat who worked at the World Bank, and was a PhD from Oxford in economics, and he was really transforming India in a big way. And he was a role model for me in terms of what people who are technocrats could do to shape a nation. So I started talking to him, and he's like, you have such an immense bird in hand, which is this computer science program at IIT Kanpur. You should look at what's happening in the rest of the world and what this thing will look like in the future. And, one thing led to another. I'm like, what? Software is my thing. Computer science is my thing. And, eventually when I applied for the PhD programs, I was pretty hell-bent on really pursuing PhD. So when I came here, I actually was a PhD candidate. I went on leave of absence and I never returned to finish my PhD. But the company that I joined, the first company I joined was an Austin-based company called Trilogy Software, which was probably the only company that knew how to compete with Microsoft on recruitment and talent and hiring. And, I learned a lot in that year and a half that I spent there. I had a great manager who went on to become the CEO of Indeed.com today, and then in 2000, I literally drove, and I had a fork in the road. I was driving from Texas and I made a left, crossed a few states, and I'm like, okay, I could go to Microsoft, work for Microsoft, go up, take the right fork in the road, or just make a left fork and come to California. And I decided to actually say no to Microsoft twice in the same year, in the year 2000. That business unit went on to become Microsoft O365. Back in the day, they used to call it NetDocs, documents on the net, on the browser. So I made a left turn and I came to California and I started working for a startup which was doing distributed file servers. This is one of Vinod's early companies during the dot-com boom. Eventually, the dot-com bubble burst and that company also didn't go anywhere, but there were some great lessons about how to build, what not to do. But that's when I bumped into Vinod for the first time. He was still at Kleiner Perkins back then. He hadn't started Khosla Ventures. Actually, he hadn't started till 2004. And, I learned about building distributed systems. Then the bubble burst. I was still there. Quite a few of us were still there till 2003. I moved to Oracle for about 4.5 years. Again, this is the time when the economy was still recovering from the bubble burst. I learned what it meant to, ship software at scale to large enterprises. What does quality mean? What does reliability mean? What do the Japanese want? Because the Japanese are big into Oracle. What does the US federal government want? How do they procure and things like that? And then in 2007, I had the itch and I figured, I need to get out and do something small again because I had done something small before that. So I joined a company which was again doing distributed databases at scale in the world of warehousing. This is before Snowflake. This was the on-prem version of Snowflake. I did that for a couple of years, and then in 2009, basically had the itch to go even smaller, not just a 100-people company, but down to something just 2 or 3. This is where I co-founded Nutanix with a couple of my co-founders who were also working with me at Astrodata. And from one thing led to another, and we built a good business. We took it public in 2016, and I was a public company CEO for about 5 years. And then I decided to go small again with DevRev.
Yeah. So it seems like the co-founders, Ajit and I'm forgetting the other co-founders' name. Mohit. You met them at Aster. And again,
actually, I knew them from before. I knew them from before. I knew Mohit from my Zambil days, which was my first job in California, where we were building distributed file servers. And I knew Ajit from my undergrad days at IIT Kanpur.
Yeah.
So I knew both these folks for a while.
Let's dig a bit deeper into Nutanix. Dheeraj, you just humbly said, we built a good business, took it public. It's a massive business. I think it's valued around 17, 18 billion today. Dheeraj, were there times where, or let me step back, what were the non-negotiable values or principles you had while building Nutanix that really helped you, make it a big success?
We were one of those really special customer-centric companies that also happen to be employee-centric. Because sometimes you go too much towards customer-centric and you don't care about employees. And you've seen that at Amazon and some of such places where they don't have, there's a lot of revolving door thing as well. And the question is, can you do both? Because employees can also be like customers. And if you treat them like that, they also build great companies on your behalf. So finding that balance was very important. Making sure we don't lie to either one of them was non-negotiable to us. We didn't want to lie to customers. We didn't want to lie to our employees. And both of them, they really appreciated being authentic. Because, you go through a lot of highs and lows as well along the way. But when you're going through the lows, if they know how you treated them during the other highs and the other lows and how you were open about things, I think people really appreciate that. And when I say people, I mean buyers on the customer side as well. Because, the product is never perfect. But with people and process, you can make it near perfect. And that's what we did. We made it near perfect with people who were very customer centric and authentic folks in customer support and sales engineering and sales reps and and people like that. But also with process. The way we built process was real time, accurate, fast. We used to use Slack a lot with our customers. And I think those ideas stuck with me, which is how DevRev really came about. But it was about being an authentic company. And finally, we did the same with investors too. When we went public, we were like, look, this is a great business. In 2018, the stock was at $65. And I said, this is the time to transform the business. And right now, the stock is at $65. So you realize how long a transformation takes. We said, when we are at the high is when we need to figure out how to think about the next 10 years. Because if we didn't, we would not be a viable company with the cloud coming and subscription being a new consumption model and such. So we were very authentic with our investors as well, and that's what got appreciated a lot. I think there were lots of isms in cultural principles. We had some really good, like 12 cultural principles in the way we operated the company. But a lot of it was about how every day was a day zero, and people had to think about that. Now it's easier said than done. We call it day one and founder mode and manager mode and things like that. But to get the next level of people and the next level of people to think like entrepreneurs, when they really have to make kind of this relentless pursuit of chasing an opportunity despite all the constraints that they have in front of them with resourcing. I think we tried to really push this down to every level. And that's how we scaled the business. We were at one point about 7,000 people in 60 countries with customers in 150 countries, almost 20,000 customers with 1 million machines running our software that we used to upgrade 3, 4, 5 times a year. And yeah, speaking of non-negotiables, technically, one of the big non-negotiables was we will never go down when we're upgrading software, ever. And that became a multi-billion-dollar feature for us. The fact that of course, unknowingly, we could go down because we had a bug. But knowingly, in a planned way, will never go down. And almost all our competitors, when they would actually refresh software, they'd have to go down. And that became such a viral thing for the company that this company really thinks about planning itself and just doing the hard stuff to upgrade machines and refresh software and upgrade data formats and things of that nature with zero downtime.
Yeah, no, it shows, Dheeraj, the kind of culture that you and your team was able to build at Nutanix. That now there's a word to it. There's a saying, Nutanix Mafia. They've just created large amounts of value outside of Nutanix, like your co-founders and yourselves. Moving to DevRev, essentially, it's really bridging the gap between developers and the customer support teams. Um, Dheeraj, of course, you said you wanted to do or go back to something small, build something from scratch. What opportunity you saw building DevRev, and what's the magical outcome you hold for DevRev?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty evident that the problem that we were trying to solve at Nutanix was where the puck was. Where the puck was with on-prem software and building data centers and owning your infrastructure, as opposed to where the puck was headed. Because the puck was headed towards renting infrastructure. It's the way music became. Music, we used to own big CDs and DVDs, and then it became like, hey, I can own 99 cents worth of a song, a single song, as opposed to buying the whole album. And then you're like, I don't need to own a song at all. I could pretty much simply stream it from Spotify or Apple Music. And I knew that this decade we're headed towards streaming, in infrastructure as well. And it was already happening for 5 years since we went public with public cloud AWS. And then, of course, in February, everything shut down of 2020. And the only emergency infrastructure was the public cloud infrastructure and healthcare facility infrastructure. So I'm like, okay, this phenomenon of streaming is only going to pick up from here. And at some point, I have to figure out if business software is also going to be streamed from the internet, where people are not going to own and really operate stuff on-prem, then what's the next big thing? And, this is the year where Vinod was talking, and like, have you heard of GPT? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's when I realized that I need to refresh myself one more time and go learn about AI and really make AI into an engineering problem, a systems problem, a distributed machines problem, which is, that's what I'm good at, understanding data and making it a data engineering problem. And that's what we made this whole thing to be. I mean, at DevRev, we built a knowledge graph of the entire company, of customer and product and people and their work and their end users and their sessions and activity and all the unstructured documents of an enterprise all come together in a knowledge graph. You throw it to a search engine, an analytics engine, a workflow engine. But to build all this stuff, we had to really think of this as a Windows operating system or a Linux operating system. We said, look, we can't get a feel for this operating system unless we also build apps. It's like, how could you build an iOS without having a music app and a phone app and a camera app and an email app? So we had to also build some apps. Like you couldn't build Windows without building Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. So we call this operating system the Agent OS. You can build agents on top of this. But to build this Agent OS, we also had to build apps. So we built a customer support app, which is a modern app on this knowledge graph. We built a build app, which is a replacement for Atlassian Jira. And we have a grow app, which is a replacement for HubSpot CRM or Salesforce CRM. And we also have the conversational AI interface that sits in your app, not in our app, but in your website, your intranet, just 7 lines of code. So now AI has miniaturized what it means to really go access your knowledge through search engine or automate your customer support with a workflow engine or really give data at the hands of business managers through the analytics engine. All of it can come without people having to really be forced to come to your app or your website, your URL. I think that will be the biggest disruption in the world of business software, where we're making business software even smaller, where things can be conversational or maybe voice activated. But you don't have to come to me. I will come to where you are. And through 7 lines of code, you can expose the power of search for your internal documents, your customer data, your product data, your people data, your work data, your user data. All of it can actually come through a conversational interface. And I think that's what's kept me busy over these last 4 years. I mean, it's a big data problem, but it's also a big interface change problem, and also going and replacing apps, because people say apps won't exist. There'll still be apps. There might be these applets, the small little things that are 7 lines of code that sits in someone else's website. But you still need apps for the specialists. Humans are not going away anywhere. Human agents are here to remain. And yet we'll actually build a parallel stack of AI agents. And the question is, can you really put both of them in kind of cohesion, in synthesis, where the AI agent sitting on an agent OS operating system that does a lot of automation and autonomous decision making can actually sit next to human agents who are still working on the apps of the year.
Got it. Dheeraj, you've built a company from scratch and took it public, which was Nutanix. Now you're on to something massive again through DevRev. You've recently announced.
Well, time will tell. I think we're not massive yet. We're still a small company, so time will tell.
But you're on the path, and Dheeraj, of course, there are a lot of highs and lows, and for you, Dheeraj, was there a particular instance or experience, or it could be a mentor, that really just changed your entire trajectory in the US in terms of your professional career?
I think it's always been a combination of folks, like my managers, two of my managers, one at Trilogy and one at Oracle. They're both really good people. And I think young people, they deserve good managers, because if you got them when you're in your 20s, late 20s, maybe early 30s, you'll actually do good stuff because you know what good looks like. And there's an acronym for it. It's called WGLL, what good looks like. And it's about developing taste for what good looks like. And not just about product and design, but also execution and process and people. I think there is something to be said about knowing what good looks like with respect to product, process, and people. And I learned a lot of that stuff from both of these managers of mine. And I attribute a lot of my taste of process, product, people onto these two managers.
Got it. And Dheeraj, do you think your Indian roots have really helped you significantly in terms, the success that you've gotten in the US? Or let's put it another way as well. Let's say if you had not spent time in India, and if you were not born and grown up in India, how would have things, how things would have been different?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to actually conjecture. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are great entrepreneurs, just and yet not being from India. So it's neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition. But I can tell you of what keeps it real for me is obviously my upbringing. It was tough. We came from a fairly challenged background economically. But there's this thing about humility and fierce resolve, and they actually are opposites of each other. Many people are fiercely resolute, but they're not very humble, and many people are humble, but they don't have the sort of resolve of really going and doing things. I think my upbringing gave me a perspective on, can you bring both in one package? And I think it has held me in good stead. Every day I have to remind myself of the fact that I need to be resolved, because otherwise the market is here to tell you that, look, you don't deserve to exist. And I think, on the other hand, if you get too much of that in your head, then you stop being humble with your customers, with your partners, with your employees. And I think just reminding yourself every day actually comes from the fact that you went through those humble beginnings as well. And yet you have to be extremely resolute. I think back in the day, with the kind of dysfunction that we went through in my teens and before, I feel like, it brings you back to your roots of how things can be so tough, and yet how you can overcome even the toughest of things through resolve.
Got it. And during your early years, there was around contribution from the community. and where you picked up both the empathy and giving back. And Dheeraj, you've been involved in the tech ecosystem for some time now. I think you know you've deployed about 600 to 700 millions of dollars in India, and you've been spending a lot of time in India through both started from Nutanix and now DevRev. Uh, how has your journey been in terms of India? How it all started for you?
Well, I think we came to India for the first time when I came was 2013 as part of being an entrepreneur and bringing business. Till 2013, we were 4 years old in 2013 at Nutanix, and we hadn't come to India just yet. So, we came in 2013, we set up an office in Bangalore, and we really, looked at India as first among equals. Like you could actually give the toughest problems to be solved. And that's what people appreciate, that you don't look at them as lesser people. And if you look at the fountain of youth that, India is producing, and really pair them up with folks with experience, so coming from the US or any other country, I think you get the best of both worlds. There's the velocity and the quality, and then they learn quality, and these people learn velocity. So it really is a great osmosis of ethos from both sides. So we've always looked at India as first among equals. I love the sort of hustle that you get from the young people, and yet they want to work on the hardest problems. And uh, I've learned a lot from young people. Many a time I come to realize how little I know. Like right now, we have some great folks who work on search, and search is a really hard problem. It's no more just the 20 years of your good old, grand old daddy's inverted index that Google actually came to build at scale, but it's also, doing vector databases at scale and doing embeddings at scale and understanding LLMs at scale. I'm learning a lot from young people, and many of them are just 3, 4, 5 years out of school. So it just keeps me humble, and it also makes me realize how little I know compared to these folks who have been fairly young in the industry.
Got it. Uh, Dheeraj, I just mentioned, you got involved in the Indian tech ecosystem in 2014. Fast forward to today, we are in 2024, 10 years. How has the ecosystem in India evolved based on your learnings, Dheeraj? And what are you most excited about?
I think the cloud had a big role to play in really providing a level playing field, that all collaboration was happening globally with cloud as the crucible, as opposed to I need data centers to do things. Because before that, you needed to actually have big data centers, which means you had to import a lot of hardware and build a lot of data center facilities and all that stuff. And with Amazon, Google, and Azure, all that became much simpler. And of course, access to APIs. Now I can really access uh, APIs that are coming from data center AWS region in Virginia, and I could be sitting as a developer in India. So there was immense democratization of computing all around the world because of cloud, and the fact that you could access a business software API over the public internet was just mind-boggling. I think that to me was a big change in these 10 years. Of course, e-commerce had a big role to play in this as well. I think the Indian e-commerce ecosystem really made people appreciate design and frictionless experiences. The mobile experience was a big part of it. And also a ton of 100 million strong user sort of customer base, user base that people came to create, that we have come to learn a lot from as well. Like we're doing some of the toughest work, some of the most at scale work with some of the largest banks in India that really give us scale, because we're trying to make support into a data problem, a big data problem. We're trying to make product management into a data problem, a big data problem. And a lot of that only comes if you have customers who actually have 100 million users, which we actually get to see from some of the Indian ecosystem as well. I think what has also happened in the last 10 years is how designers have been produced from all sorts of design schools and places like that, and how they were used to really bring the best consumer apps for e-commerce in the last 10 years too. What I look forward to is really the sort of multilingual nature of business software going forward. Because English was the lingua franca of business software for the last 40, 50 years. And I think if if we have to really democratize business software to tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, government agencies, state agencies, government, all that stuff, school districts, all this, we really have to take business software beyond English. I think, and not just for India, but also for Japan and Germany and France and Africa. There's so many places that actually you can do a really good business with. By the way, this happened to be Microsoft's modus operandi back in the 90s. The reason why they're still loved in places like Japan and China, and nobody questioned them even after the onslaught of open source. Nobody questioned them because they were so good in terms of localizing their software for the language of that country or that region. I think they're so deeply entrenched in Japan and China and Germany and places like that. I think the level of empathy Microsoft brought. I mean, I know they have a bad rap for experience over time, but I think they brought immense empathy through language, and I think it's a big opportunity this coming decade and beyond to really take it from consumer software and office software to all things business software. So I'm excited about that and to really learn all this stuff from Indian companies, Indian languages, Indian LLMs, and more.
Got it. Talking about design, I had Tushar Vashish of Healthify Me. He's built a massive healthcare platform in India.
Mm-hmm. I know Tushar really well, yeah.
He said when he was starting up, you both have a mutual or common investor, Khosla. He's also invested in Healthify Me. So I was just asking him in general, and he said, back in 2012, 2014, there was no thing as product manager. We just didn't know what product manager is. Same thing with Shiprocket. There's a company, a massive logistics company in India, Sahil. He had the same view of it. India has come a long way. And Dheeraj, if you were to pick one thing about Indian tech ecosystem, an edge that Indian tech ecosystem has or will have in the future over, let's say, Silicon Valley or rest of the world?
I think it's Junoon, or also tied to hunger. There's no sense of entitlement. I mean, in Bangalore, you start to see some, but in general, the cities and even the people who actually have never seen it, they want to see it all. I mean, cities like Chennai and Mumbai and Pune, I mean, they're unlocking so much more talent in the future. And honestly, the biggest thing is that while on one hand, people in a very dystopian world think that programmers are going to be redundant because of LLMs, I feel like it'll actually unlock more quasi-programmers, people who are not developers, but people who are ops people and project managers and program managers and product managers and maybe even designers who can now instruct the machine to go do things using prompts, which is natural language. So I feel like we'll go from 40 million developers to 250 million people who can instruct the machine to do bigger, better things. And of course, you have to learn prompt engineering and all. So I feel like computing is going to be even more pervasive, and that will be AI's biggest contribution. The fact that we unlock the potential of folks who can instruct the machine to do more things, go from 40 million to 250 million in the next 10 years alone. And India will have a big role to play there. People understand natural language, i.e. English, really well. It's we're part of the Anglosphere, which is powerful. And that also means that we can start to really use the LLM as the new interpreter of choice, on top of which you'll actually do new programming using natural language and prompts rather than Python and JavaScript and things which were still in the realm of a handful of people.
Got it. And Dheeraj, you've been giving back through various forms. One we just discussed. You've been deploying capital into India. In fact, you're leveraging India to the advantage. And you have other foundations as well, which is one of them is Grace. And there's another one. I'm not not able to remember the
It's
name.
called Paramhansa Philanthropy, the PHP.
Yes.
Paramhansa
Would love
Philanthropy.
for
Yeah.
you to just talk us through the journey of giving back. I mean, I totally understand where that philosophy is coming from. That's mostly because of your upbringing. That's how you were brought up. But would love for you to tell us more
Yeah.
about it.
Well, look, I think, beyond just a noble cause, it's also selfishly, it's my way of doing my PhD while I'm still working building companies. And when I say PhD in double quotes, I mean, like I'm learning about computational oncology, which I would never have learned because I would never have started a company trying to blur the lines between computing and oncology or computing and biology. So the kind of things we're doing is really trying to get more people together, medical school people with, folks who are clinicians, so people in computer science and AI and machine learning labs to come together and really say, hey, can we all work together? And that is computational oncology. And I think we're doing the same with places like IISc now, not just here, but also in India. And again, the big reason is I want to be a fly on the wall and just, age gracefully and learn about cancer, which is kind of the final bastion. And it's not just one disease, it's a lot. And if computing can't help, if GPUs can't help, if everything we're trying to do right now can't help us debug this bug fast enough, then what's the real value of all this sort of stuff that we're trying to talk about, AGI and things like that? So it's my sort of hobby. It's my avocation. My wife and I do this together with our chief investment officer of the family office. And I think it's just about learning. Grace is an opportunity for us to really think about women in AI. It's a foundation that DevRev actually has started. Our philanthropy helps it, but it's really about women in AI. It's product managers, it's support managers, it's support agents, it's developers, it's sales ops people. I mean, and we'll hopefully extend Grace to look beyond just women in AI to, just folks in society who are underprivileged, and what does it mean to really take. And as I mentioned to you, that AI's biggest unlock will be taking it from 40 million developers who know how to instruct the machine to do things and to expand that to 250 million people who can probably, and maybe even more, maybe in the next 20, 30 years, 1 billion people could do that if we brought the right interfaces. So we want to really just go and bring this unlock to folks who are, fairly underprivileged, in computing, in IT, in tech, and society at large.
Love it. And Dheeraj, as we know, recently there was a report regarding Indian diasporas in the US. I think 16 Fortune 500 companies are run by Indian diasporas, and I think about I forget the exact number, but good numbers of unicorns are founded by returnees and not returning. I mean Indian diasporas. And there's a saying in China, Dheeraj, that there's a massive reverse brain drain that took place in China, starting from 2000s to 2020, because China was developing. In fact, there's a stat in 1987, only 5% Chinese would return back to China. In 2017, the number went up to 79, which is 80%. Many says that the entire tech ecosystem was actually built by returnees, because what got built in China was already built in the US, and a lot of those things were built by Chinese. So similar trend it's already taking place in India. What advice would you give to Indian diasporas, Dheeraj? How can they contribute back to Indian tech ecosystem, or in fact just get involved in the Indian tech ecosystem?
Well, look, if I were to wager a guess, I don't know if we'll mimic or mirror what happened with the Chinese diaspora here, because we are part of the Anglosphere, and this is 250 years of history, maybe almost 300 years of history here. And we actually feel at home in the West. That's the reason why India is like, look, the West is as friendly as the East or the South or whatever, So unlike China, I think we feel at home wherever we are. and that would mean that we don't have to go back. Now, maybe young people won't come as many as they used to unless they're better green card and H-1B like facilities, if still available like they were used to be 20, 25 years ago. And colleges are still big here. I think universities are actually still the best in the world or in the US, so people will continue to come. I feel like the movement that will start in India, which will be about returning back or just giving back, a lot of it could be around philanthropy. A lot of it could be around global, competitive centers, GCCs as they call them. And I think over time, I think a lot of this will be about languages and LLMs and what does it mean to really bring computing to all tiers of society as opposed to just white-collared professionals and such. I think that could be a big contribution as well. And of course, helping train 100 million prompt engineers, for example, would be big. Imagine 100 million prompt engineers coming out of India would be massive. In the next 20 years, if a billion people were to actually write code, not write code, but instruct the machine using prompts, I think 100 million could come out of India. And that means that they can take care of at least 2 to 300 million people. So it's also a way to uplift society. And we speak the language of the West. And that really gives us this unique opportunity where we have people who can potentially be prompt engineers who speak the language and know how to really transact with the West. So I feel like there's going to be a combination here. It won't really be exactly the way China was. We are more services focused and China was more manufacturing focused. And I think quality of life will, the way Indian cities are, they won't be as spick and span as the Chinese because we feel like everybody should live together, should coexist. I mean, and this is down to the cows in the streets. Like, look, we can't banish them. They're here, the monkeys in the temples and the neighborhood, the birds and the trees, all that stuff, they have to coexist with the rich people and the poor people and the middle class. So it won't be this sort of all the shiny stuff you see in Shanghai and, the fact that you are not allowed to come as a poor person to this city and so on. So I think quality of life will take longer because it's going to be a 30-year journey towards making everybody somewhat richer. So I think people will make some conscious choices. Universities will still take longer to build out of India. Great education will take time. They take 100 years. If we start now, it will take 100 years to be as good as the US when it comes to universities. So you've got to mix and match. There's the best of both worlds. You provide money to the universities here, you come here, get your education, maybe you'll go back, maybe you'll work here. If you work here, you might still have GCCs in India. You'll still be able to employ people all around the world. The cloud is here. I mean, I don't look at this as two different worlds.
Got it. Dheeraj, moving to our last section. My co-pilot in the back, Alfonso, I don't know if you're able to see him.
I can see him.
He wants to get to know you outside of work. Dheeraj, we know you, as one of the, legendary tech entrepreneurs. Also somebody who gives back very actively. And what do your friends know you for, Dheeraj?
A lot of it is around laughter and humor and wit, self-deprecation, and I used to be called when I was 4. I had a nickname that my maternal cousin, who actually told me to continue to stay in computer science in 93, 94, he had given me a name, Atal, and Atal means resolute. So I'm also known as somebody who's resolute and resolved. But I think more than anything, it's the boisterous laugh, just the fact that and sometimes it's awkward too for my wife and children, like, do not crack a joke here. And I'm like, it's no big deal. And so I think children have also come to appreciate we are a pretty witty, sometimes even sarcastically witty family, all the children, I mean, they're 14 and 10 and 10. All three of them really appreciate wit and humor.
Got it. And Dheeraj, if you could invite three guests to a dinner table, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
I really look up to folks who didn't make a tamasha, like a real drama out of their careers or their entrepreneurship. They're very focused people. Steve Jobs is one of them. Jeff Bezos is the other. And the third, I'm thinking, there was a biologist, a biochemist in the 50s and 60s, Rosalind Franklin, who actually went through a lot to really help discover the double helix structure of the DNA. And I read her book like a couple of years ago, and I really felt like she went through a lot of odds to do what she came to achieve. I'd love to actually meet her and really understand how things were in the 50s and the 60s, how she actually overcame a lot of the impediments of being a woman scientist who is really trying to challenge the status quo and come up with what the structure of the DNA needs to look like. I really like strong women, there's so much to learn from them, and also for the sake of my daughters, I'm like, we need to really have a role model in strong women.
Got it. Dheeraj, I'm really grateful to you for making the time to come on the podcast and really, walking us through your journey so far. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shiva, and I hope that this is meaningful for the audience.